old are you now? There was a time when I was younger. I don't know if it was the time or it's how you see it across different times of your life. But when I was younger, let me say that. When I was younger, I used to, the idea that society was giving me was that aging was a very respectable thing. And people were given respect just on basis of being older than you. So there was the idea of stand up for your elders. If somebody older walks into the room, you stand up. If you're in a matatu or a bus, public transport, and there's an elder person standing, you stand up and you let them sit. And there were proverbs that were coined like, what an old man can see sitting down, a young man cannot see standing on top of a tree. And so there were all these, being old was hyped. But right now, as I've grown older, over the years, I've come to see that there is an increasing global crisis in terms of elderly care. Older people are dying in poverty, living in poverty and neglect, dying alone in different parts of the world, and no country is exempt from this elderly crisis. It just looks different in different countries. In less developed countries, I tend to think it's better on them emotionally, because in less developed countries, family systems are still quite cohesive. People are still quite together, collaborating, families trying to do things together. But in developed countries, there's no need for togetherness because the systems there work. You can work, earn money, and have a good life. Buy yourself a good apartment, buy yourself a car with ease. No need for harambes. There are insurances and financial benefits in developed countries. For example, if you're jobless in France, you get something called chômage. Chômage is unemployment benefit in the US. In Italy, there's another word for it in Italy. It's called NASPL, Nuova Assicurazione Sociale per l'Impiego. I don't know if I'm sure I've butchered it. But I just want to say that developed countries' systems work, there's money. And as an elderly person, you're not out of sorts. There are insurances, there are health insurances that elderly people get. But for example, Kenya, you have to pay insurance for your elderly person. Otherwise, they are not getting any health insurance if it's not the family paying for them. And I want to talk about why. I want us to just think about why. I also want us to look at how it looks like in other countries for the elderly. So for Japan is known as the loneliness capital. In Japan, we know it's a fast developing country. Nearly 30% of the population is above 65 years of age. And in Japan, that's roughly 38 million elderly people. 38 million elderly people. A documented phenomenon known as kodokushi is common in Japan, or in English it's called lonely death. That reminds me, as a lady, when you're a lady above 25 and people are thinking that your standards are too high, maybe that's why you're single, maybe that's why your singlehood is persisting, you're advised to lower your standards so that you don't die alone. That's a threat. In Japan, the idea of dying alone is very real.
These cleaners have a daunting task ahead after the elderly resident that lived in this apartment died alone and wasn't discovered for another 3 weeks.
The deceased passed away here, and the smell was quite strong because of the fluids that came out of her body. So we cut out all here and disinfected it.
This is the grim reality of Japan's solitary deaths crisis. So why are so many people dying at home alone?
There is data that loneliness is the biggest factor in shortening life expectancy. In Japan, there's a lack of community ties. I feel it's very common.
Japan's now trying to understand the extent of the problem. Government data shows around 68,000 people will die this year alone, without anyone caring for them.
It's increasing considerably. We do roughly more than 100 cases a year.
2 decades ago, Dr. Osamu Yamanaka pioneered home care in this poor suburb of Yokohama.
Some were skeletal if no one found them. I was young, and I thought it was unforgivable.
His work is invaluable in preventing lonely deaths.
If I wasn't doing it, there would be an awful lot of lonely deaths. It might have become something like a slum.
There aren't many people who are willing to deal with people from the lowest strata of society, but he is willing to come to me. I appreciate it.
Japan has the world's oldest society, so this is a problem that's only going to get worse.
But there will always be limitations in what Japan's healthcare system can do. It's up to the community to try and fill the gaps. Ryoko Sato set up a community group after her friend died a lonely death. They do regular welfare checks on almost 400 elderly residents that live alone in these apartments.
After 5 years, the number of lonely deaths became 0 for the first time.
But she worries for the future. She worries people are more withdrawn from the community.
A community must be built by everyone, but that's not possible in Japan at the moment. People are becoming selfish.
If everyone was more considerate of the people around them or looked after them, there would definitely be no more lonely deaths.
Caring for the vulnerable in life.
I tend to wonder though, since both of you, if you marry someone who is around your age, both of you may end up aging at the same time. So who will take care of the other? How? Anyway. Oburu Odinga, we saw him saying in Raila Odinga's funeral, he was parading his 2 wives, and he was saying that he onboarded the younger wife to come and take care of him and the older wife, and it's working out pretty well. And the 2 women were standing there, I guess, in agreement. I'm not supposed to be biased, but when it comes to polygamy, no, not my thing. But on paper and in theory, it sounds like it makes sense. Onboarding a younger wife to take care of the older wife, that sounds like a plan. Does it work? Is it like that on the ground? I'd really love to hear from you if you have grown up in a polygamous family. Do the younger wives take care of the older wives? Ever? Like, I just want one person to tell me that it happens and my heart will be at peace. Because I was looking at those women's facial expressions and I was trying to read their body language. They had poker faces. You couldn't tell what they were thinking. So I just want to know from one of you, does it work? Does that design work? Someone like Atwoli has ditched his older wife and married a much younger wife. And it might look like, like a growing old plan. There's a girl there who's going to take care of you. And then maybe when the girl is older, because she's going to have inherited your resources, then maybe she can pay workers to take care of her. Or maybe she can get a young husband to take care of her. I saw this lady, she was saying she married a younger man. And she was saying how he can't catch up with her. She's very flexible and she's very agile. And she was saying, if he brings a younger girl, I have no problem. She can live in the basement and she can take care of me. So it's something that's becoming common, marrying a younger person so that they can take care of you when you age. Does that work? I want to know from people who have married younger people and those younger people ended up taking care of them legitimately because of their age. I'd love to hear testimonials about that. I was reading about this estate in Japan, where after the war in Japan, that estate was a dream location for many families. It was called Tokiwa Daira, if I'm not wrong. If I find it, I'll tell you. But it was a very popular estate and children filled the streets. Every young couple wanted to live in that estate. However, 40 years later, 50 years later, the estate has become a place of old people, elderly people. Everyone has grown old. The children have grown up and moved out of that estate. And the culture in that country is not of a very cohesive family dynamic. Most families travel outside the country, disperse around the country, and basically send money or something. Which begs the question, in Africa, I think the elderly would complain most about money. they feel like they never have quite enough money to do what they need to do. But in a country that money is not necessarily a problem, the elderly are saying that they feel abandoned. So, and they are talking of lonely deaths, where people can stay. People have been known to die in their apartments alone and stay there for months. There's a lady who recently died in her apartment in that same estate, that Tokiwadaira estate. She had passed on for 5 months before the stench reached the street. And when the stench reached the street is when her neighbors began to wonder, Allah, that lady used to sit at the balcony. Maybe she's the one. And they went to check on her and found it's her. She has passed away. So they were being asked, do you guys talk? Do you guys meet? And they're like, no, we say hi to each other, but that's it.
We are living in a retirement nightmare right now with so many people facing homelessness. You know, when I grew up, seeing your parents, and then for me working decades, you think retirement is a time of peace and quiet. You're rewarded for all your hard work. And for so many, it has become a complete nightmare. It's not like that anymore, unfortunately. There are so many people right now that are one rent, one medical bill, and one bad month of being homeless out on the streets. That's very sad. But that, unfortunately, is the reality that we are living in right now. I grew up believing that after working really hard for years, and everything would be fine. You know, you're putting into your 401k. You know, if you're fortunate enough to have a 401k, I worked for only one company that had a 401k, so I really didn't have a whole lot in a 401k. I was fortunate enough to have a pension, not a large one by any means, but I just saved for my retirement. That's what I had to do. So that's what we're thinking, that everything was great. You know, a lot of people get that when you retire, people are taking all these beautiful vacations and they're walking through the sand on a beach with their margaritas. For the most part, most people aren't doing that.
First of all, if you're watching this from a developed country or a second world country, how do you guys survive without chamas? Christians have Bible study groups. Muslims have their own meetings. Hindus have their own meetings. How do you guys survive without such? What is that? How do you live alone? How does that work? So there's that phenomenon of living alone is also it's a culture in some countries. Health coverage, according to Japan's universal healthcare system, all elderly citizens are covered under the national health insurance. Very different from third world countries. Out-of-pocket costs are typically capped, with the state covering a significant portion of care. Financial and medical independence allows elderly individuals to live alone, but this reduces daily reliance on family, increasing social isolation. Italy is another country where family systems seem to be breaking down. It has one of the oldest populations in Europe. Traditional family-based care structures are weakening. There's high youth unemployment and migration separating families. The average pension payouts range between $900 to $1,500 per month. Now, compared to Kenya, the average elderly payout in Kenya is $54, about $54 thereabout per month. So you can see the difference. In Italy, the difference is high. The health coverage, according to Italy's National Health Service, universal healthcare provides largely free or low-cost access to elderly care. Long-term care is partially state-supported, but often supplemented by families.
Let's be real, once they retire, in the generation of our parents, I assume most of us they tend to be our dependents after they retire, because the financial literacy that we have in this age was not so much in their era. So you may find that most of them don't have enough financial cushion to continue taking care of them after retirement, and that means that the burden of care falls on us as the children.
I'm starting to wonder if laws should be put in place to require families to support their elderly, and how it's easy to put up laws that guide finances, but it would be very hard to put up laws that guide emotional care. Who is going to be there for the parent emotionally? And for example, in Kenya, what I've seen in the rural areas is that there's usually that child, usually the last born, who doesn't leave home, and his life, usually it's a son, but sometimes it's also a daughter. They don't leave home, their life seems like it doesn't pick up, but that becomes the caregiver of the parents. So when the other children who are in the city are sending money up country, they know that there is their person who is there with the parent taking care of the property as well. And I'm starting to wonder, when you look back in retrospect, it kind of looks like it's God designed. As families, the parents want their kids to all do well, but without realizing the hidden cost implication to their parents of the children doing well. The more you do well, it means the more responsibilities you pick up along the way. As you're doing well, you're getting married, you're getting kids, you're taking your kids to school, you're starting to build properties, then you decide you want to individuate from your family, so you actually buy a property that is separate from your inheritance land, and on and farther away you go from your parents. So it then appears that that child who things just never worked out becomes the one who ends up giving that emotional and physical care to the parents. One of the most underrated things in humanity is physical care. That's why the debate has never been concluded on whether it's sufficient to give the spouse who wasn't, in a case where spouses separate or divorce, sometimes courts, some judges don't qualify the support given by a spouse who was staying at home. But that support is huge, and it's the reason that developed country elderly people are crying, because there's not that physical support. In the US, it's also quite a crisis. According to some reports, AARP and US Department of Health and Human Services, long-term elderly care costs are among the highest globally. Many older adults rely on programs such as Medicare, which face funding pressure. And then documented cases of neglect in under-resourced care facilities are common. Again, in these developed countries, they also have systems where the structures are quite firm, where the elderly go to a home. But in Kenya and other parts of Africa, taking your elderly person to an elderly people home is considered neglect. However, sometimes I feel I'm of the opinion that if you find a good elderly home, it might actually be better than leaving them in their own home, because there they have the warmth of fellow elderly people. And if there's one thing about elderly people, they got stories for days. If you have a grandmother or a grandfather or a great grandparent who is alive, you know that you can sit for hours with them just telling you what happened here, what happened there. Of course, that is if they haven't gotten to the place where they are losing their memory. But elderly people have stories to tell. And I tend to think that when elderly people are together, they can tell each other stories, they can do community together. And that is something that is quite common in the US. Caregiving is a big industry in the US. Kenyans in diaspora have been known to start such companies and really do well financially, even sending developing their back home, developing their rural areas with the money that they're making from the care of elderly people. Health coverage. How does health coverage look like in the US? Medicare provides basic health coverage for those over 65. However, it does not fully cover long-term care, which leaves significant out-of-pocket costs. China is famous for the one-child rule, where couples were told they can only have one child. They saw this population is too high, we need to cap the population. And what happened then is a phenomenon known as the 4-2-1 structure, where one child is taking care of 2 parents and 4 grandparents, which then means that the one child that was gotten all those years ago when that rule was being set up is now taking care of a multitude of elderly people. And there's a growing gap between urban and rural elderly care systems in China. Basic pension payouts can range from $20 to $200 per month, depending on the region. In Kenya, the elderly care fee that is given by the government is between 15 to 7, according to the website of Inua Jamii, is saying that they give $15, but I know in some places they give up to $50 to the elderly. So it depends on it. It also varies from region, from county to county, just like in China. But the question remains, are we doing enough for our elderly people? How do we become more intentional on the elderly? When was the last time you saw your grandparent? If your grandparent is alive, when was the last time you saw them? In Africa, there's also the issue of, okay, I don't know if it's not just Africa, it's everywhere around the world. If you're living far away from your grandparent, every time you think of visiting them, you feel like it's a question of, do I spend the money to go and then I see them empty-handed, or do I send them all the money? And most people opt to send the money and not go. But the grandparents say, thank you for the money, but I still need to see you. So it's quite a conundrum. But I always think that if we are more intentional and if we think about something more critically, a solution will be found. So I want to know from you, what solutions do you think exist for elderly people? What solutions do you think exist for elderly people? The other cheeky question I want to sneak in here is, can an 80... I was once doing a show and somebody texted in and told me, oh my God, Lillian, I'm 80. So I had dedicated that show for elderly people. And I was telling them, you're not dead. You are not dead. Sometimes elderly people, it's like they resign to fate. They are not trying out new things. So as an elderly person, I really encourage you to try out new things, including romantic relationships. So when I said that, somebody texted me and told me, oh my goodness, Lillian, I'm 80 and I've just fallen in love. And she sent me love hearts and lovey-dovey. It was really such an awesome moment. But also encouraging the elderly people to form communities around each other and to explore different things, explore activities they can do, products they can make and sell, if for nothing else, just for fun. So those are some of my thoughts about elderly people. And I want to know, how are you guys managing your elderly? Then there are the rich elderly people who have businesses and properties, and their children don't want to run the businesses. You find that maybe the person bought land and the children don't want to farm the land. So there's a lot of land that is empty. It's not being worked on because the kids, they're not interested. They're just not interested. How do you deal with that? What do you advise a wealthy person who invested in hundreds of acres of land only for the children to maybe relocate to a different country and the land is lying idle? I find that sad, ironical. There are people in Kenya, there are always people who are homeless while somebody else's land is idle? Should they give out that land, or what should they do? If you start a business and your own child doesn't want to run that business, is not interested in that business, what should you do as an elderly person? Because there's a lot of people who have just a lot of assets and the children don't know how to manage those assets. Another thing, the rich elderly, you need to do your wills and write your wills very clearly. File them with the best lawyers so that those wills will not be doctored, so that when you die, whatever you meant to help your children with will not get stuck in court because your children are fighting. That's another thing, another phenomenon I've seen among elderly people. Those are just some of my thoughts and some of the questions I've been thinking about. I've also stumbled upon elderly people in different countries who perform crime intentionally so that they can go to prison, because they'll say that in prison at least I can eat 3 meals a day, I can take a nap. So that now back to the lower end of the stick, where you are not earning money and you don't have family. So you're now just looking for any low-hanging way that you can make money. So you end up doing crime so that you can be in prison. There was a man, he was saying that he kept doing a crime so that he could be imprisoned, and they kept releasing him from custody because he was too old and they didn't want to take care of him. Oh no, he was too old and they didn't want to take care of him. So how do you deal with those people who are, for example, elderly, homeless, hawana mbele wala nyuma? They have no money, they have no family, they have no spouse, their kids have abandoned them. How do you deal with that? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you for watching, and bye.